Hello! Exciting new product today to test. It's the first ready-to-fly drone from Caddx, and it features a Walksnail VTX. Now this is not a particularly new thing. Small quads with Walksnails, I've looked at them before. This is the Happy Model base quad. What they didn't have previously is a sort of full-size VTX. So you got like your DVR footage and you could see that as 1080. But this guy has the Moonlight VTX in it, which is this very flash new camera, which, as the name might suggest, works very well in low light, but also records directly to its SD card at 4K 60 and has gyro data, so you can put it into Gyroflow. It also has electronic image stabilization, it says. So it's a potential cinematic drone where you could take your footage, stabilize it, and it should look good. Let's hope. Anyway, in the box, basic instructions, spare props, spare screws, a battery strap. I've already exchanged the battery straps for a longer one. Tiny little wire and a hex driver. This is an ND8 filter for the camera, comes with it. USB cable. And this is the quad itself. Quite handy that it's in here, and if you look at the reverse side there, you've got some little stabilizing bars. I like it because in terms of traveling with it in a backpack, you can just throw it in here, put the top on, and it's pretty secure in there. As to the quad itself, the whole camera is kind of, there's a bit of TPU, there's some little silicon lugs in it which tries to take any vibrations out. Works off XT60, it says 2 to 4S. I don't imagine flying on 2S is much fun, but 3S, 4S looks pretty good. This is the Moonlight Kit here. What is quite different about this versus the other Walksnail stuff is you've got an SD card. Normally they've got their internal storage, but it's quite a faff because you have to collect a tiny little adapter into a USB plug, then power the quad to get stuff off the internal memory. Here we're just ejecting an SD card and we can do stuff with it. It said it recommends like a 600 milliamp hour battery. On 4S I'm kind of lacking that. I've either got like 400 or these 850s, which do fit, and I've had a quick hover and that seems okay. I've also got these little 600 3Ss, a bit less chunky. I think that might be good for in the house because this thing is very small and so should go fine in the house, which is what I'm going to try it off first. A few other specs: F405 flight controller, and it's got some sort of built-in ELRS receiver, although it's a proper one, so it comes up with its own Wi-Fi. It's got a proper antenna on the back there. So I've bound this all up, ready to go, and I'm gonna fly it around the house first to see how it feels. Obviously you're gonna need some Walksnail goggles to do it. I thought I'd pair this up with the little Radio Master Pocket, so when I go out I take a little backpack, chuck this in, and it's a very portable little solution to use. So yeah, let's get flying around the house. So just before we get flying, a quick word on firmware upgrading. You'll notice this tiny little cable that came in the box. The idea being, according to the documentation, is this is supposed to connect between two tiny little ports in here, and that signifies you want to do a firmware upgrade. What is less well documented, it seems, that if you download the firmware, you'll find now a file called independ_upgrade. If you put the latest firmware on and that file and then just turn it on, it will automatically do the firmware upgrade, and there's no reason to use this tiny little cable that you're bound to lose. So that's handy. Flying wise, I did expect just to start flying it and it would record in 4K 60. This is not the case. There's a few things that you need to know about what you can do. First off, if you're using the high frame rate on your goggles, so you want to have your 100 frame per second stuff, then it will only support 1080p recording, which you will find out when you can't select anything else. But at this point I'd love to show you what the goggle UI looked like, but using my Elgato I just could not get a picture. I found the HDMI out from the Walksnail to be one of the worst things about the goggles. It's so hit and miss whether I get anything, and I can't do it. The other thing is the built-in EIS, the electronic image stabilization, is only available if you both have the regular frame rate and 2.7K recording. It's not available in any of the other things. So I'll show you some of the stuff there, but essentially what you'd have to do is put yourself on the low frame rate, and that would allow you to select the 4K 60 recording from the menu, so you can actually record in that stuff. So just before we get onto the HD recordings, I'll show you what it was looking like indoors in the DVR, essentially through the goggles. And I have to say, I haven't really set this up for flying indoors. The camera angle is actually quite high, and if I was properly flying indoors, I'd set this a lot lower because I really can't see where I'm going unless you go really fast. So I just couldn't be bothered. I knew I was going to take this outside. I thought, let's just have a quick fly around with this. But let's have a look at what this looks like in HD. So this is 1080p. Which has been stabilized in Gyroflow. My stabilization is fairly minimal. I used a set zoom angle and a fairly small stabilization setting. So I'm just trying to take out the little shakes. And to be honest, you don't really find much of them when flying indoors anyway because we're not subject to any wind. But that is pretty much what 1080p looks like. Hopefully you're watching this in 4K, so you might be able to see the difference, depending how much YouTube mangles it, of course. So let's move on to the next one, which I used a 2.7K EIS to see how that looked. So here we are. This is 2K with EIS on, and I thought this might be useful for people who couldn't be bothered with going into Gyroflow and doing stuff. But I have to say, I don't really like it. When I compared it to the 1080p stuff, it looked more cropped in and it doesn't look as smooth. It's a mode that I tried once, looked at the images and said, nope, I don't like this. So let's now move up to what 4K 60 looks like. And this is now a 4K 60 recording, again put through Gyroflow in much the same way as my 1080p stuff. And I think it's way better than looking at the 2K EIS. It just looks not as cropped in. Some of that's my doing by not using that sort of dynamic zoom in Gyroflow. But it just seems, yeah, a lot more stable. There is, of course, extra stuff to do. You have to get your stuff off the SD card, put it in Gyroflow and go through it, but it comes out better. Of course, this is just flying indoors and in my garden, so what I wanted to do as soon as possible is take it outside and have a proper fly with it. So I'm outside in the woods and I wanted to show you the DVR footage. Now this is with the ND filter on, and you can see I've got borders round the outside, and I did talk about Caddx with this and they were basically saying, hey, you didn't have it pushed on far enough, and I was like, I think I did. The reason I couldn't check it, which will come up later, but I just wanted to show you what the sort of raw footage looks like. It's pretty good down here. We're quite protected from the wind and stuff, so it's not going to look too bad. So let's switch over to 4K and see what we got. And once again in Gyroflow, what I'm just doing is setting a set zoom just to get rid of those bits of the ND filter. And I'm looking at this stuff and I'm like, wow, this is actually pretty amazing. I have to say, I didn't expect that much from this. It's a little quad. Sure, it has, you know, a VTX that will generate gyro data, but quite honestly, I've always found Gyroflow a bit of a pain. I haven't ever, you know, put the time into it or effort that I need to get good footage out, and that's because, you know, it's hassle. It's hassle at the end of the day. You just have to do it. With this, all I had to do once I got the proper lens profile from Walksnail is literally just, in my case, selecting quite a small zoom factor and quite a small smoothing factor, and then just hit go, and it was good. And I'd compare it quite favourably to something like having a GoPro using Hypersmooth. I certainly, this is the kind of level of stuff I would expect from having my GoPro 7 with Hypersmooth on a quad, except this thing's a tiny little 2-inch thing, not a great big 5-inch carrying a GoPro. And surprisingly, this turned out to be fun to fly. It's only a little 2-inch quad, but it's on 4S, and that makes it go, you know, reasonably well. It does have a more inertia than you would expect from a small quad because I'm putting an 850 milliamp hour battery on it. But yeah, I was really having a lot of fun with it. Too much fun, one might say. Again, we'll see this later. One thing I wanted to try doing is flying up this path. You'll see how it curves round, and I thought to myself, if I can just get round that a bit, I might have an interesting sort of view of the path as I'm flying through it. And the further I got, I was like, wow, it's amazing. It keeps getting the signal. That's weird. I thought I'd be round the corner now and I'd sort of lose the signal. Of course, the problem with flying onwards where you think you're going to lose the signal is at some point you'll have to turn round. And when I turned round,
things went bad, and essentially I kind of lost it. But that's okay, because it created this small scene that I wanted to get, which is just flying along a path and being amongst the trees. And hey, I thought I'd show you the crashes anyway, because I did not crash this a lot, let's put it that way. I put it down an awful lot, because the more I did with it, the more I wanted to try with it, and the more I kind of pushed the boundaries. But that's a nice little bit flying along before it crashed. Back in some different trees now, and I came here because I thought it'd be a little bit darker. There's some sort of dappled light coming in. I thought that'd be interesting. Although at this point I've lost the idea of this being a cinematic drone, and I'm just enjoying flying around the trees, which I think is a really good sign, because if you're just out having fun with it, then it must be a fun thing to fly, not just a bit of a sort of boring thing that you'll go along and just do, you know, oh look, I can fly over this building and that'll look nice, or something like that. So you can have fun with it, you can fly around and do silly things. You just need to be aware of the weight. If you bash it into the corners really hard, the power to weight ratio is not the same as, you know, a sort of 5-inch, so you have to make accounts for that, which you pick up in the first couple of batteries, and you're like, okay, you need to go higher throttle if you're going to go hard into a corner, stuff like that. But still having fun here, getting crashes and things, but just flying around, having a good time really. And then I went to this site I think you would have recognised if you watched many of my videos, just to see how it copes with all the green. And I know Walksnail hates it if it's grass and trees and nothing else. And again, it doesn't look great through the DVR footage. This is when things can really pixelate and look a bit smeary, but turned out really well. And when I was above the trees there, it was really quite blowy. You can see me sort of moving and tilting just to try and correct for the wind. And I thought, you know, this is quite wobbly, I don't know how this is going to look, but again, it came out really nice in Gyroflow with almost nothing to do, just click go and it was good to go. It was at this point though that I became a little bit silly. Again, I was having an awful lot of fun just flying around and saying, wee, this is fun, forgetting I was doing any sort of product stuff. And I thought to myself, hey, I bet I can fly this through my legs, which in retrospect was a mistake. So after flying around for about 3 minutes, I was like, oh, come on, let's try this. This is easy. It's only a little 2-inch quad. There's my legs. Get through them. And I thought I was lined up perfectly, but nope, I just caught myself and we went for a bit of a roll. But I was so confident I had it, I thought I'll line up for another go. We'll just go for it. It'll be easy. It'll go through. Not a problem. Off we go. Bang. Hit myself again. So if we slow this down, one of two problems happens. The first one is you will see the ND filter detach itself and fly off, and that was never seen again. The other slight unexpected thing that I really hadn't noticed is that my leg had developed a leak where I'd managed to hit it twice with the quad. Why is that? I thought under 250s were fine.
So the all-out weight of this quad with an 850 mAh 4S battery, according to my scales, is 220 grams, which is not enough weight to kill somebody, but yeah, it can still hurt you. And I think the reason because of that is I presume these are sort of injection moulded in many rows, and there are these rough bits on the corners where I presume they are sort of broken away, and that is what caught me on the leg, I think, and sort of ripped a bit of the skin. Of course, if I wasn't wearing shorts, that wouldn't have been a problem. So don't fly into yourself with bare skin and, you know, you should be fine. But generally speaking, we don't try and fly into other people's faces with, perhaps, if we're using tiny little 1S whoops that weigh like, you know, 40 grams, which is not so bad. But yeah, these things can hurt you. Try not to fly into people and you'll be fine. Fortunately, Caddx were nice enough to replace the ND filters. They sent me an ND8 and an ND16, so I took it out again and did some more flying.
Here we are on my normal flying spot. This is a farm I have permission to fly over. And one of the reasons I wanted to fly here is because it's always windy. It's coastal and it's very open, so we get a lot of wind over there. And hopefully you can see in this DVR footage I've showing here that the quad is struggling a little bit. You can see a few more wobbles than normal. And always another good way to test out how a quad will handle the wind is to take it up a little bit higher. And once again, the onshore breezes or offshore wind or whatever you have here, as soon as you get up to any sort of height over about 30-40 meters is really going to hammer you quite hard. and I could certainly feel it that it was much faster one direction than the other and felt a little bit wobbly up higher. Although, to be fair, for such a little quad, it does very, very well. Anyway, put that into Gyroflow, and this is the result. I started off doing Gyroflow the same way I normally did, with not much smoothing and a fixed zoom. And then I thought, oh, this is the cinematic bit. So then I put the smoothness up. I think it's at 0.5, and I put dynamic zooming on, although I had a good look at it to make sure it wasn't going weird. And this is the result we get, which is pretty smooth. I always think, I'm not too worried about how smooth it is, because if I want it to be smooth, I'll fly better. I just wanted to take out those wobbles the wind was causing. And doing that, it does a pretty damn good job, I have to say. The other stuff is absolutely fine, but I just wanted to push the Gyroflow thing to see how far and how smooth it would get. And here's this same section as seen on the DVR before, where we go into these trees, we turn around and we get a bit of height, and it's really tidied up quite nicely. You'll also notice, if you look in the DVR, there is no sign of the ND filter, so I have to admit I must have not pushed it on properly, because this is pushed on all the way and we don't get any of those nasty surrounds in the borders. And this is looking very nice, very smooth. It's doing a great job of removing that wind. Now, of course, the idea here was, I'm going to get cinematic here. That's what it's all about. Let's not cock around, try and fly through my legs and murder the quad this time. But then I saw in the field over on the right there, you can see that some of the grass has been cut and put into those sort of bales in those bags. And I thought, oh my God, I have to fly through that. That'd be the best thing ever, basically. Here's one of my flights I did using my standard static zoom and not a lot of smoothing. And you can see that if you look very carefully at the top centre of the screen, you can just see this little bit of black bar appearing. This is because Gyroflow wants to move stuff around a bit more, but doesn't have enough scope to do it, so you get a bit of a black bar there. This is where I came up with, like, okay, well, let's try a slightly dynamic zooming and see if that works better. And that's what we've got here. And I've put the DVR up just so you can see the sort of thing I was seeing at the same time. I have to say, in terms of what you're getting as a live picture on this little quad, I was a little bit worried that, the antennas were kind of a bit buried away there and might not be very accessible, but range wise it seems to do fine. We just got a little bit of focus mode going in there as I'm ducking behind things, but all in all I've been able to fly this much the same as I would a general analog quad. I'm just flying all around myself. I'm not too worried about which way I'm facing. It seems to be dealing fine with the antennas being side on a lot of the time or behind itself, as I'm doing here. I'm either facing one way down the field or facing sort of 90 degrees to where my quad is, and everything seems to be working very nicely. What has surprised me about this quad is how much fun it is to fly. It's supposed to be like a cinematic quad, and sure, you can fly it slow and you'll get some nice pictures and stuff, but you can also fly it pretty fast. This is, it doesn't hold up against a 5-inch certainly, and I've put the DVR in there so you can see exactly how much throttle I'm having to give it, especially on the turns when they're quite tight, which is quite a lot. But it feels pretty damn quick, I have to say. It's fun to fly. I had imagined I was going to be doing a lot more cinematic stuff, trying to show this off to what it can do, but I have to admit I spent 5 batteries flying around all these bales over and over again, and I didn't get bored of it. It was amazing fun and I had a great time. And what is pretty amazing to me is how well this will tidy things up in Gyroflow. As I said, I'm not interested in getting people to think I'm super smooth. If I wanted to be super smooth, I'd really make more of an effort on my flying. All I wanted this to do is to take out those little shakes that you get, especially with a small quad, and it seems to have done that really well. For me, many will disagree, it's a little bit like having a proper GoPro type camera on a small quad. Of course, the only difference is hyper smooth happens in the camera whilst you're filming, and that is a patent GoPro protector very nicely. So it's kind of a pain in the arse to have to take all the footage off, put it through Gyroflow, and wait like 10 to 20 minutes to get 10 minutes of footage back out again, but it's worth it for the results versus what you'd get if you didn't have any stabilisation. So that is really cool. Anyway, had an absolute blast here, used up all my batteries, went home with a good smile on my face, and I didn't cut my leg up in the process. At this point, I thought I'd finished the video, and then I remembered it has this thing called the Moonlight Kit, which is supposed to be good at night. So out I go. It's about 11 o'clock. This is what I can see with my iPhone, which isn't an awful lot, and I can't even get it focused. So let's see what the Moonlight camera gets. So this is the quad, and I'm not flying it, I'm just holding it and moving around at night. And this is in normal mode. There's a normal mode, a race mode, and a night mode. So I thought I'd try it in normal mode, see how it looked. And yeah, it's doing a fairly good job of lighting up more of the scene than I can see with my naked eye. There's a couple of weird bits of artifacting in the picture, but it's not doing a bad job at actually seeing a bit more where we're going. There's me looking quite ridiculous in the dark. And this is what the 4K footage looks like of the same thing, which doesn't have the weird artifacting we got in the live picture, but does. I mean, it's getting progressively darker for some reason, which I can't quite understand. I think because it's going dark where it showed the lights there, and then when it gets less light, it tries to illuminate everything, which is an interesting thing. Quite grainy, but not too bad. So then I put the camera in night mode, and this is what I got. And this seems to be slightly less grainy. I think it does something with the illumination where it tries, I think, to illuminate everything a bit more. So I felt this was better than using it in normal mode. As I said, slightly less grainy, seems to have some sort of better way of sort of globally taking the exposure and doing a pretty good job there. So that's pretty good if you were flying, I think. However, if you look at the 4K picture from this, it's a bit weird. The edges seem to sort of make trails there. So it's like the DVR picture is better, but the recorded image seems worse. It seems to leave trails and weird stuff, and so I think I'd be happy flying with it with the live picture I got, but I wouldn't be happy with the recorded picture. But you know, maybe that's not intended to record at night, I'm not sure, but yeah, it looks a bit weird, doesn't it? Anyway, that's night mode. Now we're at the end of the video. Hooray! So what did I think of this? Well, surprising. Well, I was surprised. I didn't think I would like this because I thought, oh, it'll fly around. But I've had bad experiences with Gyroflow in the past and I didn't trust it. But either Gyroflow has increased massively, or the gyro data from this and what it's putting out is much, much better. And now it's just click a button and all those little annoying shakes you get from a small quad are gone and you get lovely footage. I mean, you be the judge of it. I thought it was pretty good footage. I was absolutely happy. That's the sort of thing I would have no problems putting on YouTube saying, look at this, I'm flying around and it's all pretty smooth. It looks good, doesn't it? Obviously, it's under 250 grams, although as you found out, it can still cause blood injuries, the gushing from my leg, but I was okay. Yeah, and that means it becomes more legal in more places. I'm sure they'll tighten up on this and pretty much you won't be able to even fly a paper aeroplane without the police tasering you and stuff. But for now, that's pretty cool. I was using the ND8 filter on it, not in the night time obviously. I haven't tried the ND16, but because I was getting pretty good results. I mean, I'm in England, it's not all that sunny. Perhaps you'll need it if you're in more exotic climates where it's even sunnier than it is here. And I really like the fact that the Moonlight has its own SD card slots. It's so much easier getting footage off rather than having to plug a USB cable in and then powering it and then having a desktop fan pointing at it so it doesn't overheat on the bench. This thing can get quite hot. When I was doing that night stuff, after the second walk around, the unit was at 89 degrees, even though I was at night and it was like about 8 degrees Celsius. It will overheat quite rapidly if you're actually running full power for it. When you're not actually arming it and it's at standby power, you've got a little bit more, but just, yeah, this thing will overheat despite, you know, the great big, what is essentially a massive heatsink. It can get very hot, so watch out for that. So any niggles with it? Just a few, and they're mostly about the props. First off, these aren't ducks by any means. These are just protection. And obviously the props are down facing, so if you're landing, although you've got a little bit there, if you're landing in practically anything, grass, gravel, anything but a really smooth area, it's quite possible to get little nicks
in the props, and obviously we want to keep this as smooth as possible. So after that first bit of flying I did in the woods, I'd gone through all my spare props and they were already nicked, so I had to buy another set, or many sets of props actually, because I thought these are going to go easy. And the problem with these props is they're incredibly tight. This sounds like a weird problem. These are screwed in, they could practically be friction mounted, and I had to grip the tiny motor so hard and then try and wiggle the prop off, because the prop is so tight that I've lost some feeling in my thumb from doing it like a while back. This is like, you know, almost a week back, and it's still a bit numb there because I'm having to squeeze so hard. I think the solution is just to make the hole in the prop a bit bigger so it will just slot on, because it will obviously keep in the right position via those screws. But yeah, that's just something to be aware of. It really hurt changing the props and was almost impossible to change them in the field because of it. So bigger hole in the prop needed, and then I think that would be good. Other than that, it's pretty good. I didn't take it huge amounts of distance. I think I got up to about 300 meters. Obviously your antennas are a bit hidden away there for the VTX. It's on Express LRS, and that you get a pretty decent range out of, but I feel this is far enough for a tiny little quad like this to go around. I did like the fact it had a turn of speed with it. It's not like a 5-inch quad, I want to make that clear, and it's not like a super acro quad you'd whiz round and do all things, because it's heavy and the power to weight ratio is different. You need a lot of throttle to pull out of things. But you know, light acro, flying around, having a good time, you will find it good fun. So I really liked it. Your mileage may vary, of course, but yeah, it's going to be a little regular for me, and it's very easy to transport around in its case and just take a little pocket with me. The only pain is the Walksnail goggles are still big, and you have to carry those as well as big batteries for it. But anyway, yeah, many thanks to Caddx for supplying it, and there'll be a link down below if you want to check it out, and yeah, cool. I will fly it some more soon. Anyway, hope that video's been helpful, and I'll catch you next one. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.